We were just doing our own thing in our own spot, moving from place to place, completely rote activity, no skill, no interaction, no synergy. They could have replaced us with highly trained monkeys very, very easily. With robots, maybe they have by now. That's not a team. And here's the first aspect of a team as we define team. A team allows each of us to do what we do best. A team allows us to specialize, to bring our unique skills to the table and pool them with the skills of everybody else. A team allows us to do what we do best. What do you do best on your team? I don't know if you've ever thought of it this way, but there's something you do better than anybody else on your team. It might be a way of approaching a problem. It might be a very specific technical skill you have. It might be a way of relating to people. But there's something you probably do better than anybody else on your team. What is it? That's the gift you bring to the team. And the gift the team brings to you is the opportunity to pool that specialty with other people to accomplish something bigger than you. I read about a man who was involved in the development of the Boeing 747 aircraft. And this man's job in the entire project was a little switch box, no bigger than a loaf of bread. The man worked on that switch box, get this, for 15 years. For 15 years, he designed and built and tested and did troubleshooting and redesigned and rebuilt until he was done this switch box. And finally, when it was time, he delivered the switch box to the assembly team and they put it together with all the other parts in that prototype 747. And he said that on the day that 747 took off, it was the most happy, most satisfying day of his life. Why? Because he built a silly little switch box? No, because he'd applied his specialty, his skills, in concert with others to accomplish something significant. That's a team. A tight team allows each of us to do what we do best. It allows us to specialize. I've read quite a few books on team. And among the better ones is this book by Patrick Lencioni called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. How many people are familiar with this book? Anybody? 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. If you're a team leader in any capacity, this really is one of those must-read books. It's one of those leadership fables. It tells the story of a fictional team that has some issues. And as you read about the fictional team, you begin to recognize in some cases your own team. And this team has 5 big issues. And Lencioni points out in the book, through the fable and through the other material, that most teams, when there are issues, when there are challenges, the core of the problem, beneath the surface, behind everything else, is the issue of trust. The primary dysfunction of most teams is an absence of trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have a team. A team absolutely requires trust. Now, most teams have issues. This team has issues. In the lead up to this weekend, I met with Ken a few times, and Ken was just very open with me about the history of the company, about the challenges of the company, about the goals and dreams of the company. I asked for some emails from some of you, got probably a dozen or 15 emails asking a couple questions about your team. Very interesting to me that what Ken said and what you said meshed pretty well. But nobody mentioned the issue of trust by name. However, I think most of you would recognize and agree that trust is an issue. Trust is a challenge. Trust is a challenge in almost every workplace. And we're going to address trust in our second half tonight. A few years ago at a military base in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, a young supply clerk by the name of Jeff Lewis, he was 23 years old, there was a clerical error, and because of that clerical error, Mr. Lewis found himself one day sent out to the tarmac. He was loaded onto an airplane, a parachute was strapped to his back. He was ordered to jump from several thousand feet, and all of this was without any prior parachute training. Mr. Lewis jumped. He landed unhurt, but when the glitch was uncovered, people asked him, "Lewis, why did you go ahead with it? Why did you jump?" And this is what he said. "I was just doing what a good soldier is supposed to do. The Army said I was airborne qualified. I wasn't going to question them." That's an example of trust. maybe a naive trust, maybe a dangerous level of trust, but you can't question that Mr. Lewis trusted his team. What could you do with a team that had that kind of trust? That's a high level of trust. I worked for a few summers in a smelter, in a union environment. And I was working on the floor of the smelter in what's called the converter pit, where we melted down the rock and skimmed off the slag until we had almost pure copper, transferred it to the casting plant. And I was working in the converter pit on the floor, and this one summer there's a fairly nasty contract negotiation going on. What made it especially interesting for me was, in addition to being in the union, I was dating the daughter of the president and the chief operating officer of the company. So I got a unique perspective. Some of the union guys didn't actually trust me, but I got a unique perspective, seeing what happened in the union meetings, seeing what was discussed at the dinner table at my fiance's and now wife's dinner table. And I realized there was not a lot of trust between those two groups. The union and the management worked under the same roof. They supposedly had the same goal of producing this copper and producing this zinc, but they weren't a team. There was no trust. A team absolutely requires trust. No trust, no team. One more aspect of team as we define team. This is a quote from a book called The Wisdom of Teams. See if you can catch the third facet of an effective team. A demanding performance challenge tends to create a team. The hunger for performance is far more important to team success than team building exercises, special incentives, or team leaders with ideal profiles. In fact, teams often form around such challenges without any support from the management. Conversely, potential teams without such challenges usually fail to become teams. One of my biggest discovery about teams as I studied teams is that a team is not formed when you bring a group of people together and call them a team. That doesn't make them a team. A team isn't formed when you bring a group of people together and put them through some kind of team building activities, though that can help in the right circumstances. One of the most satisfying jobs I ever had was cutting survey lines in northern Manitoba for geophysics. And the way it worked was this: they load a bunch of us up onto a plane, throw in a snowmobile and some lumber and a tent and some groceries, and fly us out on skis to the middle of nowhere, drop us off on a lake, dump out the gear, dump us off, and fly away. At that moment, we had to become a team to survive, especially on some of those miserable 30, 40 below camp move days. We had to become a team to survive. We had to get the gear to the shore, clear a spot for the tent, put down some stringers, put down the plywood, put up the 14 by 16 foot tent, get the wood stove going, cut some firewood, cook dinner, build an outhouse, cut a hole in the ice, all the things involved in setting up a camp. We had to be a team where it was all over. And then we had to be a team to do the job. These were in the days before GPS. And we'd be given a map with some lines on it, and we had to cut those lines where they were on the map. So we had to figure out how to locate the baseline, how to line up with landmarks and topo locations and get that baseline going in the right location. And then cut the section lines and cut another baseline, and sometimes we'd be there for weeks and months. Well, when the job was all over, we'd radio for a plane. The plane would come, and many times it'd be a nice clear 20 below day, and as you took off from the camp, you could see for hundreds of miles in the bush these perfectly straight lines. And there's this strange sense of satisfaction from seeing that you'd done something visible, something concrete, something measurable, and you'd done it as a team. And some of you know that kind of satisfaction, doing something measurable as a team. A team rises up when there's a clear and compelling challenge. That's what makes a team. If you get a group of people together and throw in the middle of them a challenge that is clear, they know what they're supposed to do, and it's compelling, it's significant enough that they know if they achieve it, it will be satisfying, that's when a team forms. When it has that clear and compelling challenge. Now, I'm not here because I'm an expert in your areas of work. Far from it. But I do know team. I've studied team. I've been on athletic teams, good and bad. I've led a staff team. I've led a volunteer team, which is even scarier because you don't have the big stick of a paycheck to motivate them with. They can just leave when they want to leave. And I've discovered it doesn't matter what kind of a team you're on, if there's that clear, compelling challenge, a team rises up and gets serious and accomplishes something significant. So here's the definition of team. It has the specialty, it has the trust, it has the challenge. Here's a definition to work with. A team is a diverse group of people united by trust and by a challenge that calls for their best.